one of the things that we just really want to see is that lives really get connected to Jesus. And one of the things that can happen in churches and in communities is you can be strong in areas that create something that's not quite connecting to Jesus. One of a great way to look at it like this is if you had a barrel with all these like staves going around the edges, right? And you start to fill the barrel with water, right? Well, if one is 4 inches shorter than all the others, that's as high as the water goes, right? And sometimes you create barrels that have really high staves. You look at this barrel's huge, but really there's one that's way down in there. And as we're kind of moving forward, we have this really unique chance, right? I know coming through the pandemic, I know we're not supposed to probably talk about it anymore. We're supposed to forget if that ever happened and move forward. But there was a really unique opportunity to reinvent some things, to do things a little different. To go, yeah, that's how we've done it in the past, that's worked, and we don't want to let go of everything. that's kind of chaos, and our world is in that space right now. We don't want to let go of everything. But we get to reinvent ourselves. And I think, hopefully, the church, especially the church in the West where we live in the United States, gets to rethink how we do some of these things. Gets to reconsider, what does it actually mean to be a follower of Jesus? What does it actually mean to be in community? What does it actually mean to be in the world? There's been seasons in our nation where if you would ask somebody, well, what religion are you? I remember doing the SATs or whatever, doing tests, and the kids would go, well, there's like a religion section, and they go, oh, just put Christian, right? And they're like, what does that mean? I don't know, just mark it, right? And maybe many of you have had that somewhat of experience and whatnot. But we're coming into a season where that's not always going to be the case. And a part of us can get kind of scared about that. Where's things going? And it's like, hey, look, don't worry. Don't worry. The whole story arc of the Bible, every story, every account, everything that happens in text is God's people going, oh no, this is going to fall apart. Oh no, everything's crashing down. And God being like, it's okay, chill. I got this. Yeah, but God, like this is happening. I know. I kind of see it too. I'm here. Right? And that statement, I am here, is really the wonder of all of Scripture. That God is moving in the world. He's moving in your life. He is in the midst of what's going on. Whoever's president, God is moving. He's in your life. Whatever's happening on the other side of the world and coming through the little box telling you what to be afraid of, God is moving. He's in the world. Right? He is doing things in the world. As a church, we have kind of 3 things that we say, this is what we want to be about. And I want to go through those 3 things. If you've been here for a little while, we've gone through this message. I kind of go through this probably 2 or 3 times a year. A little bit of a different angle every time, but try to hit all these things, because if we lose sight of some of these things, or we get things out of whack, it becomes something weird. And the church in the West has proven that it can gather people. Okay, check. It's proven that it can make an experience, play some music, and people go, oh, Jesus. Right? But real transformation is much harder. It's the real work. So one of our first statements that we kind of go for is that we want to be a place where we have a community of people gathering together and following the way of Jesus. Right? So there's a gathering aspect. There is hey, we want some people to be a part of this. It'd be kind of weird to do a church and be like, I don't want anyone there. Right? Everybody attends that church, right? Monday morning, right? Everybody attends that church. We want people to be able to come together, so that changes how we kind of do things and think about things. But we want to see those people coming together and then following the way of Jesus. Now, the way of Jesus is not necessarily knowing a few Bible verses. It's not necessarily saying, hey, when I was 10, I went to a summer camp and I said this prayer and went on my way. Those are all good moments and good things. But the way of Jesus is reading through the Scripture, especially the Gospels, and going, oh, there's this love your enemy part. I don't want to do that one yet. Okay, well, love your neighbor. Okay, well, I can start maybe there. You got good neighbors. I got good neighbors. So that's easy, right? Some of you got neighbors that are like, they're my enemy. Well, there you go, get twofer in one right there. You can go for it, right? And it's hard, and then it gets complicated because it's like, well, the world isn't like as perfect as it should be, and it's how do I do this and I walk through this? So it's hard. It's hard to follow the way of Jesus. So we need each other. We need community. We need to come together and bounce things off from each other and get prayer and get encouragement and get wisdom so we can actually do this. And one of the ways we do that is we are intentional about our spiritual formation. Right? So that's our first phase of this journey, is spiritual formation. Now, many of us, maybe that's a new kind of term. It's really not that fancy. Maybe in different church settings, maybe you heard the word discipleship, right? Discipleship's a weird word. We don't really use that word as much anymore. I like kind of maybe the word apprenticeship. If you've ever done an apprenticeship, you ever worked under somebody and learned a trade, learned a craft, right? As you work under someone. The deal is, though, is for followers of Jesus, you never graduate out of the apprenticeship. Right? Jesus is always the master, and you're always learning, and you're always looking, and there's always room to grow. Amen. So spiritual formation is looking at our lives as things are coming together, and it can actually be built up. It can be made into something. And that building takes intentionality. It takes intentionality. And here's the deal. All of us are practicing spiritual formation all the time. Every human being is forming their inner world, their inner life, their thoughts, their emotions, how they view the world all the time. And things outside of you, probably more than we'd like to admit, our rugged individualism as New Englanders, right, is forming us greatly. And when we take our spiritual formation seriously, we start to hand those things over to God, hand those things into Scripture, hand those things into the community of God and say, I want to be formed intentionally. I don't want this to be an accident or just whatever the cultural whim is. I want to be formed. If you have a Bible, would you open up to Galatians chapter 4. Galatians chapter 4. While you're flipping there, we're going to be in verse 8. While you're flipping there, while you're finding your phone, the book of Galatians is a book that Paul is writing, and the issue that's going on is not necessarily an issue we have today, even though we find it here in pockets, but maybe the heart of it is still always around. But the early Christians were Jewish. They came out of the Jewish tradition. Is anyone a little cold? I'm cold. Anyone? Is this me?
I'm cold.
Can we just pop it up? Can you just hit like 3 or 4 degrees on that? Yeah, thank you. Someone spoke up. I can see somebody like, no, I'm not cold. Yeah, like, come on, you can say you're cold. I'm chilly. And usually it's like 10 degrees warmer just on this 50-foot stage we got for some reason. So down there, you're probably chillier. I'll fight over the sound of the thing there. Anyway, where were we? Oh, the early Christians were Jewish, right? Jesus was Jewish. His closest followers, earliest followers were Jewish. And they came out of this Jewish tradition, right? Well, the Jewish tradition in their time, they were wrestling with, well, how do these two things coexist? Right? I have this Jewish tradition that says, well, I take care of my inner life and my sin and my brokenness by these kind of rituals through sacrifice and temple worship and these different things. And now Jesus comes along and he's like, well, if you believe in me, if you follow after me, I am like the Passover lamb for you. Right? That absolves you, that brings away your shame, that pulls you back into a relationship with God. And then because he resurrected, now we have this new life with him, with the Spirit, with God. We're close to God now. Things have changed. They haven't radically changed. The old story's still there. The old things still have meaning. There's just so you have these two communities kind of button heads. The Jewish community doesn't really like this new Christ-Jewish hybrid that is out and about in the world. And they're having some issues. And so Paul would go around and start these churches, find people that either knew about Jesus and get things going, and then he would leave and go start another one. But while he's gone, things would happen in those communities. That's what most of the New Testament epistles are. He's writing back to these communities going, hey, boneheads, I came, I got things going for you, got things going good, you were doing great, and then you kind of started to goof up. So that's kind of the context. So in verse 8, he says this, formerly, When you did not know God, you were slaves to those who by nature are not God's. But now that you know God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you are turning back to those weak and miserable forces? Do you wish to be enslaved by them all over again? You are observing special days and months and seasons and years. So let's just pause there for a second. Right? So many of us, maybe if you yourself or you know someone close to you that's wrestled with addiction, right? You start to get out of a rut and things are going well, and then you find yourself kind of slipping back, right? Slipping back into those things and that wrestle that's in there. But he gives us a little hint of what their slipping back is right here. You're observing special days and months and seasons of the year. So the Jewish calendar, the worship of different dates and different things going on, you're slipping back into that, right? He says, I fear for you that somehow I have wasted my efforts on you. I plead with you, brothers and sisters, become like me, for I became like you. You did me no wrong. So he's saying, hey, look, we have a relationship. I was with you, you were with me, we grew together. Does that mean anything? As you know, it was because of an illness that I preached the gospel to you. And even though my illness was a trial to you, you did not treat me with contempt or scorn. Instead, you welcomed me as if I were an angel of God, as if I were Jesus Christ himself. So he's lifting them up. He's like, you guys are awesome. I came to you. We don't know exactly what's going on there. What's the illness? Is it a metaphorical thing? Or he came in as, because Paul will use this language that he is like the chief of sinners, right? Or did he have an actual illness? Did he come into their place and he really wasn't planning to stay there, and he was sick and they welcomed him in? Probably the latter as he's going through this. But you welcome you guys. So he kind of gives them a little, like, you ever had one of those hero sandwiches, or you give a compliment and you go, well, you do so great. But you're really awesome, right? He's kind of giving them one of those, little textbook leadership thing here. You got some things to work on, but hey, remember that time, right? So we're doing a good thing here, helping these guys out. Where then is your blessing of me now? I can testify that if you could have done so, you would have torn out your eyes in giving them to me. Right? You have done anything for me. Have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth? Those people are zealous to win you over, but for no good. What they want is to alienate you from us, so that you may have zeal for them. It is fine to be zealous, provided the purpose is good, and to be so always, not just when I am with you. So he's kind of laying out this case. They're getting pulled astray. They're getting pulled out of the faith. These are followers of Jesus, people who have experienced the presence of God. They've experienced hospitality. They've experienced the good things of God. And these other teachings are starting to pull them out of the fold, to alienate them, to separate them. That's what bad teaching does. It pulls you away. And then he says this, my dear children, for whom I am again in pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. Right? Until Christ is formed in you. Right? He doesn't just rest and say, hey, you guys said the prayer. You gather every once in a while. You do a few good things for people. You're in. No. He's saying Christ needs to be formed in you. There's a maturing. There's a growing. There's a being built up that when the waves of other thinking comes, you can handle it. Right? And for many of us, again, we've been given a message that says, repent and believe, and you'll be saved. And that is so true. But that's where we start. We start with a relationship with Jesus. The Spirit fills us, and now we have a little help against our brokenness to overcome those things. And then we allow for Christ to be formed in us. Right? This is his hope, because here's the deal. We live in a world that is, right now, is so transient. Right? We move, we jump, we go from place to place, things happen, things move. If your time here is spent making some friends, great. Making some connections, singing some songs, great. Having moments where you just feel close to God, awesome. But if there isn't something that is built up in you in your time here, I think we miss something. Right? I was taught years ago this idea of in church sessions, and really all sessions, is you hold people loosely, or you hold people with an open hand, right? Because when you hold people like this, it's not very comfortable, right? If you've ever been held like this, it hurts. You hold people like this, and they come and they go, but while they're in your hand, while they're in your relationship, while they're connected with you, are they growing? Are they a little better than they were when they came? For Christ to be formed. So how does this work? One, it works maybe a little different for all of us. Some of us are wired a little different. Some of us are prone to different things. But the main ways, the more simple ways, the ways that we connect with God is one, in community, which we're going to talk to you about in a second. Coming together, being encouraged in faith. The Scriptures, right? Knowing the Scriptures. And I'm not saying it to be a Bible whiz. I know every single thing, right? You got to go through. But knowing the story arc of God, knowing that God is in control and that He is holding all things together. And that's hard to do in a world where it feels like everything's falling apart. But if you don't know the story, it can be hard to hold those things together. For me, one of the formational moments in my life was year after year after year being with my grandmother who would teach Sunday school. Right? She'd have the little felt boards, right? And I would spend a lot of time at my grandmother's house, and Saturdays, sometimes we'd be there on the weekend overnight, and she'd be preparing her lesson, and she would tell me the Bible stories. Because I was that kid that needed to hear them like 4 or 5 times. Right? Right? In the Sunday school class, I'm not getting much, right? This is, I'm the one that's like doing weird things, drawing on stuff, breaking stuff, right? But I would get these stories over and over and over. And I would say in my younger years, it was in and out, and I wouldn't say I had a real foundational faith, but I always knew that God was in the world and that He was working and He was going to work all things together. I didn't really have the ins and outs. I didn't know how I fit into that. But because of those stories, because I can look back and go, oh, God was faithful to Abraham. This is what He did. God was faithful to Isaac. And this is what He did. And God was faithful to Daniel. And God was faithful to David. And God was faithful to Israel. On and on and on. Because I knew those stories, even if they were just felt board versions of the stories, I knew that God was working in the world and that He was good. So if you're in a place where you're like, fear and anxiety is higher, get into the Scriptures. Right? And it's not a race, it's not a marathon, it is not compared to anyone else. If it's a few verses here and there, better than nothing. Keep moving into it, keep reading, keep studying. There's so many great resources in the world. The other thing is worship. I'm not talking necessarily the singing that we do here on Sunday. I'm not necessarily talking, even though that can be a big part of it, but it is having a reflection of the world that is grateful towards God. Right? When you look out and you see something beautiful, you can go, oh, that's a beautiful sunset. That's great. That's good. But God, thank you for your beauty in the world. That little bit of worship layer that comes in on things starts to transform how you see the world. So worship God. Get into the Scriptures. Worship God. Get into community. And then another thing that I would throw in there, and we're going to talk about this a little over the next, through Ecclesiastes, is living a reflective life. Right? Taking time to be still and know that God is God. Right? And that kind of sometimes concerns some of us. Maybe if you come from different backgrounds, you're like, I'm not just going to sit and be quiet. Well, one, because you probably can't. Right? Many of us can't do that, so we're resistant to it. And then sometimes we go, oh, that sounds kind of Easternish. Well, Jesus didn't grow up in Nevada. Just let you know that the Scriptures were not written in Connecticut. We come from the Middle East. Okay. So some of that stuff does get in there. But the difference between more Eastern and the Eastern version of religions that we get here are commercialized and watered down. And they're probably offensive to people that actually practice those faiths. But to be still is one thing, and that's good. But the Scriptures command us to be still and know that God is there. Right? So it's a different type of focus. It's a different type of thinking. It's not just emptying our mind. No, it's emptying the clutter and putting in the things that we would want to focus on. Right? You got a psalm and you just, oh, that's so good. Well, sit with that. And the second your mind starts to, oh yeah, that car payment, and oh, I got to get the kids over here. Read that verse. That's what I'm going to focus on. Be still and know that He is God. So those types of things help us with our formations. Wherever you're at, just start. Just start. Right? There are seasons of life, there is mercy and grace that is given by God, where there is times where it just feels like you're just growing leaps and bounds. And then there are seasons where it just feels like it's snail's pace. That is normal. That is how it works. Sorry. But if you read the stories over and over and over again, there's moments where it just feels like God is so distant and He's quiet. Then when He shows up, it's like, wow. Right? It's like the rain is coming, right? You know the story, and there's a cloud way off. And they're like, see that little cloud? And they're like, they put their hand up and they go, that's how big the cloud is, way off. Rain's coming, don't worry. Like, that's all you got? Don't worry. I know it's been quiet, I know it's been drought, I know it's been long. Rain's coming. Right? You hold on to those things. But here's the deal. In those slow moments, our tendency is to just shut the car off and give up. Keep moving forward. Slow down. Reserve. Find a little bit of hope and just hold on and just keep moving. God in His faithfulness will come back around again and things will move in a different way. It's when we disengage and we pull out. We miss out what God is doing in that time. Another aspect of what we hope to form here is not only spiritual formation, but participation in community. Now, that is the church community and the larger community. You live in a world with other humans. Did you know that? There's a couple of them right around you. I know in our New England, Mainer space, we sometimes wish there wasn't as many, right? But some of you can see other houses from your house. That's amazing. That's like weird to me, right? We're not going to spend too much time here because, one, if you're here, you probably have a value for community. We don't need to sit and move in that too much. But there's a difference in just being in community than participating in community. When you participate, you're looking around and going, where do I fit? Right? And in seasons, again, there's seasons where maybe you fit a lot, and there's seasons where you feel like, oh, look, if it's just saying hi to someone regularly, and hey, I'm going to make sure I foster that relationship on Sunday. Right? Just remembering someone's name. Some of us, that takes 2-second meetings. Some of us, that's like, I know I've talked to you 15 times, but I'm trying. Right? That could be your place in the community. That could be where you're participating. It could be a number of different places, but actually connecting. Now, if you have a Bible, you can flip to this or not. This one isn't going to be as long here. But if you have a Bible, let's look at Jeremiah chapter 29. And in the book of Jeremiah, he is kind of prophesying and saying, hey, look, these things are going to happen. You're going to be pulled away. You're going to be in this different place. And the Israelites have been brought to this other nation, and Babylon and these other places, and life is really hard for them. This is what he says to them. This is what the Lord Almighty, in verse 4, Jeremiah 29. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Right? So they've been carried into this place. Build houses, settle down, plant gardens, and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons. Give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there. Do not decrease. You would think maybe when you get there, like, you're going to fight. You're going to resist. You're going to do all. He's like, no, go there. Prosper. Build things up. Move forward. Verse 7, this is the one we really want to look at. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Love your enemy. Right here in Jeremiah. It wasn't a new idea. Seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. A lot of times what happens in faith communities is our community becomes this room. And that's not bad to a degree. These are people hopefully we can trust a little bit. We build community over time. But the world out there becomes a boogeyman. Scary and mean. And I need to be against it. And I think over and over, the scriptures would remind us to pray for our community. Hope that they prosper. That doesn't mean we say yay to everything that happens. Right? We are still exiles. The culture and the difference is there. But we say, despite that, I'm going to try to love. I'm going to try to pray. I want things to go well for the nation that I am in exile in, because it will go well for me. It's a different clicking of thinking. Community that just becomes a club for those who are in, and the out is bad, is a club that is on its way to no longer existing. And the church overall is, in the United States, is walking that step. For many years, many decades, generations, there was, no, let's not go there. That's going to be too messy. That's going to make us sick. The next part I'd like to look at, the last remaining of time, is in the book of John. So if you have a Bible, you can flip there. John chapter 5. Woo. Someday we'll get like a real thing up here. This thing is so sketchy. Anyway. So if we're taking our formation seriously, we're trying, it's not a race, there's no one coming by and grading. We're just working towards that. We're all in different places, and we're being honest and open and moving in that way. And we're in community, with church community and a larger community, looking for places to bless and be a part of that. The next part then comes this place of being on mission with God. If you are starting to get kind of healed up and formed, and the things of God are starting to be found in you, and you're starting to move in that way, and you start to have compassion and love for others, how the community should do, you're going to start seeing needs. You're going to start seeing people as, oh, wait, they need to know the love of God. That would fix this situation. If this family knew how much God cared for them, they would pull things together. If this person knew how valuable they were to God, oh man, you start to see that Jesus solves so many issues. And you go, wait, I think I actually have that peace. It's right here. You start to find yourself on mission with God. So I want to read this text and we'll end with this. This is in John chapter 5. It's a little bit of a story here. It says, sometimes later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered gazebos. Here, on the great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. When I'm trying to get in, someone else goes ahead of me." Right? So the picture is just these folks around this pool of water, and there's some kind of myth or story that if you get into the water when it's stirred, maybe you will be healed. So these are desperate people, right? They're banking getting well by maybe if I get into the water. I love I think it's in the new Chosen series, they depict this, and the person's like trying, and the people are just clamoring to get in, right? And he's kind of gets jostled and beat, and just that 38 years of that. 38 years of trying, not making it. Trying, not making it. Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." I love Jesus' prayers. Sometimes I think we've got to beat things up. Jesus, At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was the Sabbath. So Jesus walks out. He sees these people who are helpless and harassed, like sheep without a shepherd. And for some reason, when he finds out that this person's been in this condition for this long, there's something that happens that he picks this one and performs this miracle. And this little note, the day on which took place was on the Sabbath. And so the Jewish leader said to the man who had been healed, "Is it the Sabbath? The law forbids you to carry your mat?" This guy hasn't carried a mat in a long time. He's carrying his mat today. But he replied, "The man who made me well said, 'Pick up my mat and walk.' I wouldn't disobey." So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." I always wonder, that was a little like, maybe he said it like in a real, like, be careful. I wonder if he's like, "Hey, you're walking, be careful." Like there's this like little playful banter that's going back and forth. And the man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who made him well. So because of this, Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath. The Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, this is where we really want to pick up. So this story, Jesus heals this guy. It's miraculous healing. People are like, "Hey, you can't carry a mat on the Sabbath. What's wrong with you?" And he moves forward and moves to that place. Now they're going to attack Jesus for healing on the Sabbath. Right? And really what this is getting to is there are times when there is the right thing to do. And that's our thinking and mind is only set on that. What is right and wrong. And we can start to become rather religious, rather legalistic. And people who are, in our minds, doing things that aren't quite right, even though God is healing things in them and moving them forward, we start to go, "Hey, cut it out. Cut it out. You're not supposed to do that." That religious, pharisaical thinking starts to come out. When you start to be on mission with God, you'll find yourself in places where people are desperate, people don't have it all together. You'll start to find that you yourself don't have it all together. You start to step out of the religious structures, start to step into the real world. In his defense, Jesus said to them, "My Father is always at work to this very day, and I too am working." For this reason, they tried him all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal to God. Jesus gave them this answer. "Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees the Father doing." So this little back and forth with Jesus should be an encouragement to us. We go out into the world, right? There was all kinds of people at the pool. He heals one. Right? He heals one. And it seems like, I don't know how it always works, and we experience moments like this, but somehow the Father led Jesus to the one. Right? Sometimes we think, well, if God was really working with me, there would just be miracles and just life abundant everywhere I went, and everything would be made right. But here's Jesus, who could actually probably pull that off. He was one. So the encouragement for us is as we go out into the world, as we live our lives, in the back of our mind, the ethos of who we are, we're always going, "God, what are you doing? What are you doing with me right now? What's happening around me?" And we're not necessarily looking to heal the whole pool. We're just going, what is one thing I can do? Maybe you're a stay-at-home parent with your kids. You're sitting there with your kids. "God, what are you doing right now? What are you inviting me into?" Maybe you're in a workplace and there's lots of people with different things that are going on. You go, "Yeah, my task is to do X, but God, what are you doing? What are you doing in this space?" And as you follow that trail out, you'll find yourself partnering with God and being on mission with Him. And for many of us, we get in the spiritual formation that does some things, and our traditions and different things form us. We get into community, but this being on mission kind of is a weird place. Like, how do I do that? Because we have in our minds, the rhinestone cowboy preacher on TV, or we have the great missionary, the great thing. Look, years ago, we'll end with this. Years ago, there was a little, campaign or whatever, little bracelets. I remember this. What would Jesus do? Anybody remember those? Right? I kind of missed that little period of Christianity. Those few years, probably do better. I missed some of that. And a better question would be, well, that's not bad. What would Jesus do? A better question would be, what would Jesus do if he were you? Right? Because what would Jesus do means I have to stop being me and kind of step into Jesus mode, which Jesus got. He got that part played out pretty well. You don't need to step into his part. If I was me, if I'm X years old, got X amount of kids, or got a business, or I work in this place, or I'm retired, what would Jesus do if he was a mechanic? What would Jesus do if he was a cashier? How would he show up in that space? Start asking that question. What would Jesus do if he was a grandfather of little kids? What would he do? How would he show up? And if that's kind of always running in the background, you're going to find yourself responding maybe a little more whole, showing up in those places. So can we stand together? We're going to take communion together. No matter where we go as a church, and in New England, church attendance is like this. Some of you from the South, you don't probably see it yet. But in the fall, everybody is repenting from their hedonistic summer, and they come to church. They come to church, things get back into rhythm, then winter comes, things get hard, and travel, and visiting family, and then spring will come, and the depression that is set on us from the cold and the long no light, and the birds singing. The other day a bird was singing, and I was just like, oh. Anyone like, oh. Some of you like this winter, and there's something just wrong. But spring comes, and then people come back because they're feeling alive again, and then summer comes. That's fine. And we'll make it through those. But if we don't reach these three things, then it's like kind of all for naught. If we're not growing and Christ is being formed in us, so when the wind and waves come and beat on us, we don't just get swept away. And if we're not getting into community with other people helping us, encouraging us, and we really hard at that formational part. But when we get into community, we start to see the world and other people as a place where we can bring goodness and bring wholeness. We have a piece of that. And that we don't just go into the community empty, but we go with the presence of God and the wisdom of God and the goodness of God. We can bring healing, salvation, and hope. It's not us who does it, but we know where the goods are. That is life transforming. It's cooler than any church, cooler than any ministry. It's people who gather and they scatter back into the vast of the. So as we take communion together, there's a number of things that happen during communion. We are connecting with the church over the last 2,000 years. We are connecting what God has been doing. He's moving things closer and closer to a day when He will put all things right. And there's hope. There's hope. So today we're not going to have a kind of like prompt for the communion other than just you come up, grab it, you're going to take it kind of on your own when you're ready. One of these three things, just kind of think, God, which one do I need to help you? Which one do I need to just kind of invite you into a little bit more? When you have that in your mind, just say, okay, God, I invite you. Invite me in mission. Help me with this formation, please. Help me with community. I don't like people. The way we do communion here is we come down the center aisle and we kind of roll off the sides to help with traffic. We do an open communion. If you are a follower of Jesus and you're saying, I want more of Him, I know that Jesus can bring healing to my mind, body, and soul, and forgiveness of sin. Come and take. If you're not sure what's going on right now, this feels weird to you, just watch. You don't have to come. Just watch what's going on in the room and watch what's going on inside. But with that, can we come forward and receive the elements?